So I'm welcoming Dai Hankey to have a chat with Dai about the Red community, specifically about the Red community. But before we go into that, Dai, just introduce yourself for those people who don't know you. Can you tell us?
So my name's Dai Hankey. I am born and raised in Pontypool in the Welsh Valleys. Now living in Cardiff with my wife and our 4 teenage children and 2 dogs.
Okay, which we've already heard, haven't we? But they're off camera now.
They're off camera now. Yeah.
Off camera. Yeah, great.
Yeah.
Listen, I'm really grateful to you for taking the time, okay? Because I know that you're busy with ministry, you're busy with life. You know, did you say 4 daughters?
No, 2 sons, 2 daughters.
Two sons, 2 daughters. So that's a full-time job in itself. But you're also involved in ministry. But I'm going to focus on one particular thing, okay, which is the Red community, because I was interested when we had a conversation a couple of weeks ago, and I know other people will be interested to hear about Red community.
Yeah.
But it started with a vision, didn't it? An actual vision, yeah. So take us back to that 2012. Am I right?
Yeah, 2012. Some people might remember that Ignite, now Message Wales, but Ignite were doing an event called Ignite Hope back in 2012, where there was like different hubs around South Wales where there was training and local evangelism, and then in the evenings there was a big meeting in Sophia Gardens in Cardiff where there was different kind of outreach stuff happening, and I was tasked with doing the teaching at the Valleys Hub in Blackwood. So it was on one of the mornings. I was up in a church in Blackwood in the morning. A small group of young Christians, young believers that were getting prepared to sort of do a day's outreach and evangelism in the area before going down to the city for the event in the evening. And it was in that meeting in Blackwood where God completely knocked me sideways, really. Like, so what I'm about to share, I've never had anything like that happen to me before, and I've never had anything like that happen to me since. It was, in many ways, it was a trajectory shifting moment for my life and for my family's life.
Okay.
And how it played out was, and until that day, I'd never really heard or thought a great deal about the issues of human trafficking or modern slavery. Obviously, I was familiar with what prostitution was, and I knew that was an issue. But I was happily serving a church plant up in the valleys that I planted, several years before. I was happily, there, living up there, and my family were happy there. But I went to speak at this event in Blackwood, and it was in the worship time during the singing time before I was meant to be getting up to speak. That as I was just singing a worship song, and I very clearly, with my eyes closed, saw a vision of the red light district in Cardiff, specifically a roundabout which is known as the Magic Roundabout, in this vision. And there was a woman walking along the pavement around the Magic Roundabout who was clearly a sex worker. And as I saw this vision, I audibly heard the voice of God shouting at me really urgently, "Go and rescue her, go and rescue her, go and rescue her."
Wow.
And that was it. And I just burst into tears because it was literally the maddest thing. I was just completely smashed by it. I was meant to stand up and speak a few minutes later. My eyes were raw with tears. It was a completely bizarre moment where I had to sort of transition from that, moment to then go and do a teaching session for these young people. But, and so I managed to muddle my way through the teaching session. But for the rest of the day, I was completely captured by what had just happened and trying to make sense of it. Now, I'd probably describe myself as a charismatic with a seatbelt. So I am.
First time I've heard that one, but it's good.
Yeah,
I like it.
Yeah, I am totally open to the Holy Spirit. But I'm from a much more reformed background than many, and so. But I knew that was something which was from God. And so I literally went to Cardiff that night. I was meant to be doing I was doing the main teaching in the tent in Cardiff that night as well. And yet I was more concerned after I'd preached the gospel on that night to go to that area in Splot and to go and see if somebody needed rescuing. I was convinced.
Gosh.
I was convinced that I was going to have to go there and start swinging punches or something. So I went there with my fist clenched, ready to go and intervene in something. My adrenaline was raised all day, like thinking God had given me a word for that day, for that moment,
Yeah.
But when I got there was no one there, and I was like, well, what the heck was that about? It was really weird. And so, that in many ways was even more concerning and confusing, because I was like, well, I know what just happened this morning happened.
Yeah.
But I don't understand why when I went there, nothing happened.
Yeah. So, obviously, like you say, it knocked you sideways. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it was so clear that it made you go into Cardiff just to check it out.
Yeah.
But retrospectively, looking back, what God was doing was giving you the bigger picture, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Was birthing a vision in you.
Absolutely that. So I went home that night and said to Michelle, my wife, I said, babes, this mad thing happened to me today. Like God just shouted at me. And like I explained what had happened and how I thought that, going there that night, was going to be, what it was all about. And then when I said, but, there was no one there. So what does this mean? Her kind of, her counsel was, well, maybe God wasn't giving you a word for, that day. Maybe God was actually trying to get your attention to the broader issue. So maybe that's what was going on. So, so much,
brilliant.
So much sanity in my life comes through my wife. I mean,
exactly.
You need to meet her to understand that, but she's a gift on so many levels. But so yeah, I was like, okay, and Lord, if you're trying to get my attention, you got it. So what do you want to do? But what do you want me to do next?
Yeah. So it's out of that really that the Red community has been birthed. Yeah. So
yeah, there's a series of steps which kind of got us there.
Okay, take us along those steps then, Dai.
Yeah, so the first thing I did was I contacted a friend of mine who is a Christian lady who works with sex workers in Cardiff, just to sort of like try and care for them really, and to try and offer, hope and share the love of Jesus with them. And so I got in touch with her and I said, look, I explained what happened, and I said, this is what happened. What do you think is going on? On the one hand, like her counsel and her advice was really helpful. It led us to relocating to this part of Cardiff where we live now to plant a church. That's a different part of the story. But it was also clear that while there were a lot of Christian ministries internationally and broadly across the UK that were sort of concerned with this agenda, like back then in 2012, trafficking and slavery were much bigger issues than they are now. There are certain social justice issues seem to rise to the surface, and then they kind of fade away. And most people would appreciate that. And so back then there was a lot of good work going on. There's International Justice Mission, there was A21, Exodus Cry. In the UK there was Hope for Justice, but there didn't seem to be anyone doing anything specifically for Wales. And what I've never been a believer in reinventing the wheel. If someone else is doing something, I'll happily get on board and support that. Do you know what I mean? So I wasn't looking for more ministry to do, but far from it. Again, it's a theological conviction that I've got, but I think that any move of God has to be birthed in prayer. And because I didn't really know much about although God has got my attention, I certainly was happy to put my hands up and say, I'm not an expert in all this. I haven't got a clue. We started, I say we, I started at the time. It wasn't a we at all at that point, but I started monthly prayer meetings in Cardiff to try and gather together any Christians that might be bothered by the same issues that I was starting to get stirred about, but also to invite speakers in who could share wisdom and insight on what was going on, because I knew that I couldn't lead prayer meetings about trafficking and slavery because I didn't know anything. So I think it was on the first Friday of every month in 2013. I'd done some stuff between that April and 2012. I'd had meetings with people, gone to different screenings of different films. I had started to get some sense of education. Right. But 2013 started a first Friday of every month, a prayer meeting in the evening, inviting in different speakers, showing different films, and then praying sort of targeted prayers for specific things. I mean, now it's not as in the media as it was back then. But it's been a problem throughout. I mean, the exploitation of the vulnerable by the powerful has been a problem since since long time, since the dawn of time. Vulnerable people will be exploited by wicked people, and that's essentially all that modern slavery is. It's the exploitation of the vulnerable by the powerful for illegitimate gain. And that has many forms, as I'm sure you can imagine. But back in 2012, I didn't really know that. And I guess just to say as well, although God used that vision of a sex worker, to grab my attention, what I learned very quickly was that the issues of exploitation go way beyond, just what happens in a red light district. In fact, there are some in the red light district who wouldn't even see that they were being exploited. Modern slavery has many, many faces. Forced labor, criminal exploitation, domestic servitude, county lines, organ harvesting. There's all kinds of horrible faces of modern slavery, and that's what that 2013 was all about, really, finding out what exploitation looked like, and then trying to gather Christians who had a heart to do something about it. I still feel like I'm learning, and I just like the police, like the authorities, constantly trying to catch up with what's happening, because basically criminal ingenuity is a thing, and people are constantly finding new ways of exploiting people, and so but yeah, I mean, certainly some people look at me and they're like, oh, Dai knows what he's on about with this stuff, and probably next to them I do, but I wouldn't.
Next to me you do.
Yeah, but I wouldn't put myself personally forward as an expert per se. What I am is a frontline practitioner now. I'm my hands are dirty with getting stuck in. My sleeves are rolled up, and I'm immersed in the issue now, rather than just sort of like watching in from the outside. 2013 was all prayer and awareness raising. But we did want to have an answer to the question, what can we do next? But as I said earlier, and it's a genuine, it's a conviction that I have more broadly in ministry, not just with Red Community. I really don't like it when Christians try and do what other people are already doing, but they just stick a cross on it and make out like it's better. I would rather do what's not being done in the name of Jesus than sort of like replicate what other people are doing and say, well, because we're Christians, somehow it's better. So what I didn't want to do was start looking what other people were doing in this area and just try and do a Christian version of that. So there was a season of seeking God from the end of 2013 into 2014. What does the next step look like? What does Christian involvement, which is really going to serve the kind of the issue here in Wales, what is that going to look like? Got together a meeting with some of the kind of authorities and with a few other people, Christians, who are connected with us through the prayer stuff, and just said, like, what can we as a church do to really meaningfully serve in this kind of area? And obviously the issue of accommodation, emergency accommodation, came up, and so we looked into that, we risk assessed that, and we realized that actually it's quite a risky thing to ask a Christian family with no training and no kind of like existing support network to put up an individual in their home who might well have links to criminal exploitation gangs. So we risk assessed it and said, well, the residential thing in the first instance is probably going to be a bit too difficult for time. At that time, Red Community wasn't even a charity. It was just a bunch of well-meaning people. Red Community is now a charity, but at that time it wasn't. So we said, maybe that's not like, the first next step. But then one of the ladies who was involved, not a Christian, just one of the ladies in the authority who'd been contacting Jim, she said, well, there are other things that we could suggest. And so we said, well, what would be those other things you could suggest? And so she said, well, a lot of the ladies and the men that we're supporting, they live in community in South Wales, but they got no one supporting them. They have people that may help them on a kind of practical level. They got solicitors and lawyers and whatnot, but many of them don't have any support in community. Her suggestion was, why don't you look at training up people in your constituency, i.e. the wider church, to be befrienders for victims of trafficking and exploitation in Wales.
And is that, am I right to think, is that how the Embrace project was birthed?
That's it. Yeah.
Okay, tell us about the Embrace project then.
So essentially, the Embrace project has two arrows in its quiver. The one that I guess I'll talk about, the one I was just explaining, which is the friendship one. Yeah. One is a befriending project where we basically work with, and it's anybody who is a follower of Jesus and is a part of a local church in South Wales, doesn't matter what denomination, who is willing to spend at least 2 hours a week for a period of a minimum of 12 months in just offering the gift of friendship. It's not proselytizing, it is literally friendship. It's like supporting, it's going out for cups of coffee, walks in the park, those sorts of things, going to the library. And it's not a support worker, it's a friend. Anybody's willing to do that, then we'll make connections between the authorities and the authorities now refer people to us and say, like, we got this lady really needs support, she's in this community, and then Lauren, our embrace coordinator, will be like, well, I've got this a list of ladies from churches that are willing to offer support. I think looking at the profile of this person and this befriender, we can maybe make a match there. And then the first 12 months is very kind of well safeguarded. There's a check-in before the meeting, there's a check-in after, there's case notes each time you meet.
Wow. Okay.
Just so that it's done really safely and well for the protection of everyone. But then after 12 months, if they're still friends, because friendship isn't clinical, it's relational and it's real. Yeah. If after 12 months that friendship wants to continue, then they can carry on and they're friends for life. And one of our kind of problems, in inverted commas, is that a lot of the women who we train up as befrienders don't come around for round 2 because they stay committed to the person that they were befriending. And so there's and it's dozens and dozens and dozens now. I can't remember the exact numbers. It's probably pushing 100 friendships that have been set up.
So really, if there's anybody listening to this now, watching this now, okay, and they have a heart for that, for just coming alongside somebody and being a friend to somebody who's been exploited, they need friendship, then they can contact.
Yeah, absolutely.
Red Community and just make further inquiries. Okay, I'll make sure I put the details in the description. Okay.
So right now, the majority of that work is happening in Southeast Wales. We've tried to push it into North Wales, but that hasn't been as successful. Not from our end, but because of the authorities that that need to connect survivors to us. That just hasn't worked out well. So people can pray about that, because we really do want to push into North Wales. But also West Wales and Swansea, we're really wanting to push, this year especially, we really want to start looking at getting people supported in Swansea and Carmarthenshire as well, so and beyond. So we'd love to hear from people from all over Wales if they're interested in that.
Brilliant.
The other arrow in the quiver is our sponsorship project. It was clear to us that some of the people who are working to support survivors of slavery in Wales and across the UK more broadly, they can get access to financial support, on several levels, but there's a lot of red tape attached to a lot of sponsorship. Christians often want to give, and they also want to be confident that the money that they're giving is going to where they want it to go. We've set up a sponsorship pot where support workers who are supporting survivors of slavery can contact Red Community and say, look, I've got this emergency situation. Woman needs clothes. She needs healthcare. She needs just a bus pass to be able to get to work. And she needs it urgently because, and so can you help? And because of how streamlined it is, and because it's small grants rather than big whopping grants, I think we have if it's anything above 200 quid, we probably would need to ask a few questions, before we sort of chuck it in. But anything less than 200 quid, we can literally have money in someone's bank 24 hours after the request has come in. One of the most memorable moments I have in my Red Community journey was I was on Cardiff, St. Mary Street many years ago now, probably 5-6 years ago. And I had a phone call from our Embrace worker saying, look, we just had a bid in for some money from one of the authorities. They've just rescued a woman from an exploitation situation in a brothel. All she's got is the clothes that she was working in. Can we have some money to buy her some new clothes? And to say yes and know that by the next day this lady's wearing a new set of clothes is just proper beautiful. That's the gospel, isn't it? And so, and
sorry, I hope I'm not cutting across you, but just in listening to that now, it's not just a compassionate, merciful, gracious thing to do, okay, in giving her a set of clothes, but you're actually giving her a new identity as well with those clothes.
It's a picture of the gospel, isn't it? It's literally what Jesus does.
Absolutely. A new identity, that she's got a new set of clothes where she doesn't associate. Obviously it goes deeper than that, and there's issues that she has to deal with, etc. Yeah. But it's a great place to start in that she's got a new set of clothes. Yeah. And she's left those other clothes behind, So anyway, sorry, go on.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's the Embrace project in a nutshell. When people give financially to Red Community, we can genuinely say the vast majority of our money, I either goes to paying Lauren, our Embrace coordinator, to do what she does to facilitate it, or more often than not, just to these small grants going out to people.
Brilliant. Brilliant.
Yeah, so that's the Embrace project in a nutshell.
And then you've got a coffee thing as well. I'm going to go in. Is it you say it Manumit?
Manumit, yeah.
Manumit.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tell us about that, because that's sort of another part of this Red Community ministry, isn't it? Am I right?
It is. I really wanted to share this one more thing with you before I do the coffee thing, though.
Sure.
Is that all right? Just
of course.
It's just another one of the stories that, for me personally, has really kind of captured the journey that Red's been on. During that year, 2013, when we were just praying, not having a clue what we were doing, I remember really clearly one night I felt that we should pray specifically for the issue of sexual exploitation in Cardiff, just because that was the thing that had caught my attention in the first place.
Yeah.
So we had somebody came in and shared some stuff with us, and then we prayed, and we prayed specifically for Cardiff and for what was happening in Cardiff. Found out not long afterwards that night, about 2 hours after the prayer meeting that we'd had on that night, a brothel was raided on City Road in Cardiff, and 2 Nigerian ladies who had been trafficked in under threat of witchcraft, juju witchcraft, had been rescued by the police that night.
Wow.
It's all over the news and everything. That's how I know it was, what night it was. And the 2 traffickers were prosecuted and and served time for that. So it wasn't just that women were rescued, but also traffickers met justice. And I think sometimes Christians think that prayer is just this thing we have to do alongside the stuff, the real ministry. Like, literally, we can't claim any credit for what happened that night, but we flipping felt involved. Do you know what I mean?
That must have been a tremendous encouragement for you.
It was,
that you were on the right track, and that thank you, Lord. We've heard you and you've answered, and it must have been such an encouragement.
It was bonkers. It was literally that night.
Brilliant.
Yeah. So anyway, that's just another little story from Red's journey.
Thank you. Yeah.
With the befriending project, the Embrace Befriending project, very early on into that project, some of the ladies who were befriending, so the Christians that were doing the befriending, started feeding back to us. By this point, we were a charity.
Yeah.
Look, the lady I'm supporting, she wants to get back into work, but she's really scared of getting, a 9 to 5 is quite a scary prospect. Not sure. She's going to cope with that. So could Red Community provide some kind of a next step back into employment, or whatever? It is something that I've been thinking about. I put to the trustees the idea of setting up a coffee shop to employ survivors and help them to get those skills that I've been after. But the trustees basically fed back and said, Dai, it's a great idea on the surface, but actually a coffee shop's a terrible idea, because that's a really socially demanding environment to put a potentially traumatized individual in. Maybe they could get to that point, but that's not where you would start someone.
Because you're front of house as well, aren't you?
Yeah, front of house. Interacting with people, day in, day out. So I was annoyed in the moment. I was like, oh well, what should we do there? We got to do something. I had this dream set, and I was annoyed because they were right, not because they were wrong. I was annoyed because they were right. So I said, well, what do you suggest? And one of the trustees said, well, why don't we look at coffee roasting? And I was like, well, how does that work? Again, like trafficking, I had no idea what that involved.
Okay. But now you do.
Now I do. There's another thing I guess I'm not an expert in, but I kind of know more about than I did.
Yeah.
And he basically said, look, we can do roasting in a coffee in a warehouse. Anonymous, no one needs to know where it is. It's completely safe. You can lock the door if you have to sort of stop people coming in. It can be completely safe and completely anonymous. And we just decided to push a few doors. Manumit Coffee Roasters. Manumit means it's an English word, an old English word that means to set free from slavery or to release from the hand.
Gosh, okay.
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
okay.
So the reason we like the word Manumit is people normally ask, what does Manumit mean? And then you get to tell them what it means, and therefore you tell them.
Door opener, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a way of telling the story. Yeah, so I think since 2017, we've employed either 13 or 14 men and women. Currently got 5 survivors working for us from all over the world.
So do they come in one end and then go out the other end, into other employment? And
So I would say that the vast majority of people who work for us have gone on to find other employment. Some, sadly, one or two have come in, in a difficult situation. One girl in particular was so traumatized and so troubled that she only lasted a couple of weeks, and she couldn't stick it out. And I pray for her regularly, man, because I don't know what happened to her. That she was very vulnerable. But like there's one girl I think she's been with us for 4, maybe even 5 years now, and she's like doing well. She roasts all the coffee now. So she's like smashing it. She also has, designed all of the kind of packaging for us.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So with the coffee, very, very quickly, when we interview survivors, again, all the people that we work with, are brought to us by the supporting authorities already. So we're not having to sort of put a classified out saying survivors wanted. The people who now support survivors know about us, both on the befriending level and on the kind of employment level, and they now approach us, which is beautiful. And so when we interview someone at Manumit, we say, we let them know 3 things. That if you come and work for us, number 1, we want you to know that you are safe. So everything that happens in this environment, you need to know you're safe. And I often tell people that one of my main jobs at Manumit is to be a safe man.
Right.
Is to be a man who honors and respects women.
Brilliant.
I look them in the eye when I talk to them. Don't ogle at them. Don't speak back down to them. I encourage them. I want to be the kind of bloke that blokes should be. And so that's one of my main responsibilities, is to not be an idiot. I think Nick would say the same thing. So we say you're safe. Number 2, we tell them you're precious. That we believe that who you are, just by definition of who you are, you're a precious person. So we're going to treat you with dignity, going to treat you with care, however you've been treated before. We're going to treat you like you matter. And this is all on the wall. So when they come in, they see you're safe, you're precious. And then the 3rd thing we've got is you're free to dream. So we will often ask.
Wow, that's powerful.
Yeah, so
it's powerful, Dai.
We'll often ask them and say, what do you want to do with your life? And more often than not, the answer is, I don't know. Often it'll just be, I just want to be okay, or something like that. But then our job as a business, and so we employ a wonderful lady called Sophie from one of the local churches in Cardiff. She's basically there as a support worker. The women love her. And her job is to sort of basically get alongside the staff and essentially coax out of them as they start to find their feet, they start to recover, they start to heal. You then might start to hear actually wouldn't mind trying my hand at baking, or wouldn't mind trying my hand at being a hotel cleaner, whatever. And then our job is to put wings on those sorts of aspirations and just say,
amazing.
Okay, how can we help you get there? And so, you're safe, you're precious, you're free to dream.
It's amazing, because just in listening to you, I can't help but see the contrast. The world that they've been brought from, exploitation, used, they're not precious, they're just a commodity. Mm-hmm. To be brought into this environment where they're safe, where they're precious, where they're given permission to dream, or encouraged to dream. The contrast there. It's easy to see how the gospel will just hit them in the face, really, the kindness and the grace of God. Amazing. Lovely.
Yeah. And, I agree. It's absolutely gospel centered. All 3 of those things are rooted in the gospel, but it's not, again, it's not proselytizing. Mm-hmm. We don't mandate you got to come to church, or you got to listen to us preach at you. We're just putting the gospel on display. Some have come to church, some have come to faith. Some still worship other gods and have no interest in church, but we still love them all the same. And it's very easy when somebody is vulnerable to exploitation. You can exploit them spiritually as well as commercially, and we want to be very careful that just because somebody is vulnerable, we don't exploit that.
Because that's just another form of exploitation, isn't it? Really, at the end of the day,
mate, spiritual abuse is a thing. Do you know what I mean? And we've got to be very careful that we don't do that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we need to be ready to give a reason for the hope that we have. And so if we're asked, why are you guys praying upstairs, sometimes, before the shift, or, why is it that you all go to church on Sunday, or why did you set this business up? We'll give a reason for it.
Absolutely. Listen, I want to ask you one thing, okay, to close this up. You've given us so much to think about, really, in this, but I'm going to ask you to share with us, how can people support you? I'm going to come to you and Michelle personally in a minute. Leave that one to me, okay?
Okay, that's fine.
But as far as Red Community is concerned, how can people support you? We've touched on one. If that they want to get involved as a befriender, they get in touch with the charity.
Yeah.
What about, the coffee and finances? How can people? You tell people how they can support you.
Yeah, Red Community, prayer. As hopefully the story I shared earlier, pray for us. It is a spiritual battle, and I'm blown away by the amount of spiritual warfare that comes hand in glove with this issue. I've experienced personally more spiritual, dramatic spiritual warfare connected to the abolitionist work that I do than evangelism, which is bizarre to me, because there's a spiritual battle. Pray for us. If you go to the website, redcommunity.co.uk, if you want to connect to Embrace, you can do that through there, and with a befriending thing. But also there's a giving button. I don't get paid anything by either Manumit or Red Community, and so I'm not asking you to pay my salary by pressing give. If you press give, you will be giving to the actual practical care of survivors in South Wales, and so
Brilliant.
So you can do that with the coffee. I'd say two things. Go to the website manumitcoffee.co.uk, and if you drink coffee personally, it would really help us to take out a subscription and subscribe to get a bag of coffee sent weekly, fortnightly, monthly, whatever. You would do it in small bags and kilogram bags. But more importantly, if you're in a church and your church drinks coffee and it's not Manumit coffee, firstly, do you hate them?
Why?
Yeah. We really, really, really need churches to start using Manumit if they can. If the more quantities of coffee we sell, the more survivors we can employ. It literally is that simple. So, please get your churches to start drinking Manumit coffee. If you're currently on instant coffee and you don't know how to get across to ground coffee, I'll happily help you and your church achieve that. I'm now a dab hand in weaning people off the evil of instant coffee and getting them plugged into the really good stuff.
Brilliant. Let me just ask you something. I think I picked up when we spoke last is that you and Michelle, you're dependent on support in it to be able to pay your bills and live, really. Yeah. So now then, you've got a stewardship page, haven't you? Yeah. Okay. I don't want to embarrass you or anything. Okay. This is why I'm taking this out of your hands now, because I feel I want to say something. Okay. Because what I want to say is, to those people who are listening, that we really need to think about supporting these guys, Dai and Michelle, because they're at the front line of Christian ministry, and they're in a challenging place with regard to the ministry. And so the rest of the church, the rest of the body, have got a responsibility to actually support these guys so that they can be free to do what God has called them to do. Okay. So as you've just heard that Dai, they've got a stewardship page, so it's all sort of legit, so to speak. And if you go to stewardship, that's another link I'll put in as well. Okay. So that they can concentrate, so that they can focus on doing what God has called them to do, and not be worried about finances, not be worried about what's coming in this month. I would really encourage those people who are part of the church. You don't have to be part of the church. If you feel these guys are doing a great job, they're at the front line, I want to support them, go to their stewardship page and you'll learn more about Dai and Michelle there. And I would encourage that. So it's for that reason, Dai, that I took that one out with your hands. Okay.
That's very kind, man.
Yeah,
I hate that. So,
yeah, I feel passionately about it. So, I hope I've not embarrassed you. And
not at all.
But that's the situation. Listen, is there anything else you want to say before we bring this to a close? Or
all I want to say is, if you're a Christian watching this, two things: love Jesus Christ in light of his love for you, and then learn to listen to his voice. And then if you live out of that, you'll have the best life, and he'll take you on adventures. It might not look like this one, but I really want God's people to love him, to listen to him, and to live accordingly.
Brilliant. Great place to finish. Dai, Thank you. You know, I sense there's another conversation further down the track with other areas of it. Yeah, with other areas of your ministry. But now, for now, you know, thank you very much, Dai. Okay, God bless you.
Deal.